So in this video, we're going to talk about prospect scoring in Pardot. If we head over to our administration area, automation settings, and then scoring, Pardot went ahead and created some default scoring for us. So scoring really helps us understand how interested the prospects are in our company or organization. If we look at the scoring rules here, we can see that Pardot went ahead and created some default scoring. You do not have to keep the scoring. We can definitely edit the scoring. One thing to note with editing the scoring, it is retroactive. So if we go to edit the scoring rules, because maybe I don't want to give a negative 5 points for people who accidentally have an error on our landing page. And basically what that means is, let's just say a prospect, we had the company field on our landing page and it was a required field, and the prospect didn't add in their company. It will result in an error when they try to submit the form, and it will say, hey, you need to enter in the company information. I don't want to give a negative 5 points to those prospects who just accidentally forgot to put in their company. So I could put this to 0. I don't want it to affect their score. Again, one thing to know is that it is retroactive. So if we've already set up automation rules that are based on scoring, it's going to go back, and instead of having a negative 5, it's going to change everyone who might have had a landing page error to 0 points, which might give them 5 points more that could trigger off a automation rule to bring in a lead assignment, for instance. So that's one thing to take note of when we're going ahead and changing our scoring rules. I definitely recommend to change them before we start actively using the scoring rules for anything, to whatever you want. Really, there is no set score on any activity. It's really up to you as a company how you want to set that scoring for your sales team. So for instance, we could say that, any prospect who has a score of 75, we're going to consider that an MQL, and we want to push them through an automation rule into Pardot. So what I would do is I want to add up, okay, how do they get 75? Well, it could be that they submitted a form. So we had a form that was worth 50 points. And then let's say they accessed a couple of files. So let's say they did 9 points worth of files. So we're at 59. And then they went ahead and they viewed 20 different pages on our websites. That can include blog posts, etc. And that could hit them off the 75 scoring rule. So if we set up an automation rule that said, okay, great, anyone who matches 75 or above, go ahead and push them into Salesforce. Once those prospects hit that score, they'll go ahead and be pushed into Salesforce. So really, a couple of things that I do want to note on the default scoring rules that I change personally. I do not put a negative point system just because people made an error. It happens all the time. It could be a hot lead, and that negative 5 points could be that they didn't get pushed into Salesforce just because they forgot to put in a required field. So I go ahead and change anything that says form error to 0 points, form handler error to 0 points. We can also do the same thing with the landing page error. We can put that to 0 points. The other items that I do change is I change for webinar attended and webinar registration. So if we have one of our webinar services that are connected through the Pardot connector, I will go ahead and say, hey, if somebody registers for a webinar, I want to add them 10 points, but if they actually attended, that's as strong as a landing page form fill. So I'm going to do another 50 points if they've attended a webinar. So those are two items I do change. Again, the scoring, honestly, the set score number doesn't really matter. I like to work backwards. Let's just say an MQL is 75 points. How do people get to that 75 points? Or let's just say an MQL is 50 points. How do our prospects get to that 50 points? Just by doing different actions. So these are the actions I'm going to look at where I'm going to score them, and I'll work backwards to saying 50 points, what do I want them to do? About a year ago, Pardot went ahead and created scoring categories. There are a lot of companies that have different sectors or different verticals within Pardot that aren't necessarily the same, and we don't want to score them necessarily the same. So Pardot did add in scoring categories. We might want to, let's just say for instance, we have a shoe company, and we want to score our athlete shoes differently than our dress shoes. And we want our sales team to see how much interest they have in athlete shoes rather than in business shoes. So we can add a scoring category. And I'm going to name this scoring category business shoes. And I'm going to go ahead and include all historical activity. And we have to choose a folder. So basically what this means is any assets, anything that we create, forms, landing pages, files that are about business shoes, we want to make sure that they're included in the business shoes folder. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder. Oops, let's go ahead and choose. And I'm going to add a folder, and I'm going to call it business shoes. Oops. There we go. Great, so we have our business shoes folder. We can add, say we have a couple of different folders where we might have assets for our business shoes. We can go ahead and add them. But for right now, I'm just gonna go ahead and add business shoes. And then the next scoring category, we have our athlete shoes, or we can call them sports shoes. So let's go sports shoes, include all historical activity. And let's create a new folder for sports shoes. So as you can see here, we have two different scoring categories. We have sports shoes and we have business shoes. Let's go ahead and look at one of our prospects so we can really see how we can differentiate the scoring. So we have our overall score and how we can differentiate their activity within sports shoes and business shoes. So let's go to our prospect list and let's just grab in Miss Betty Bear. So we can see here we have their score overall, which she has 0 score, but we could click on this and we can actually see their overall score, what they've done to create that activity. But then we can also see, how many activities has she had within the business shoes and how many points has that gained her. And that's the same with the sports shoes. So if she was interested in sports shoes, what kind of assets has she consumed? So what kind of activities did she consume under the sports shoes and how many points did that assign her? This really helps our sales team understand what verticals, what areas, what subsectors of the business that scoring activity is being related to. If we go back to our automation settings and our scoring, we can go ahead and talk about the different types of scoring categories we might want for our prospects. Again, we have some companies that we're not going to add scoring categories, it really doesn't matter. But we also have other companies where they do have those set verticals, and it really helps the sales team understand what type of activity is really sparking their interest. What are they really interested in? So again, this is just a great way to show if I had a shoe business out here, my prospects who are where their interest really lies, if it's in the sports shoes or the business shoes.